Hello, I'm Glen Williams, and I'd like to welcome you to the second executive briefing session from Cyberfort. I'm delighted today to be joined by Mark Humphries. Mark, maybe you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi, thanks, Glenn. Yeah, so I chair a number of companies on behalf of private equity firms, one of which is Bluprintx, which is also invested in by Palatine, similar to Cyberfort. I also chair three other companies. And in a prior life, I also chaired Quorum Cyber, which was backed by Living Bridge and since been sold to Charles Bank of the US.
So, Mark, I don't know if you've seen this, but NTSC are saying that there's going to be, or this over the last 12 months, would have been 50% more cyber attacks on UK businesses. So why do you think that's the case?
Yeah, I mean, that's a horrifying statistic, isn't it, really? And I guess we're seeing it across, all of our businesses, and you're seeing it across your clients. There's no doubt that the threat landscape is getting more intense out there. There's probably more bad actors, not just local bad actors, but the state bad actors. And I think as we see more conflicts around the world, I think we're feeling that across our businesses as we get attacked by those state bad actors. I'm kind of thinking classically Russia here,
yes,
Iran, Northern Korea, to name a few. And clearly people are getting benefit from doing this, and therefore they wouldn't be doing it. So there's no doubt that economic crime is on the increase.
Yeah, we see that. I mean, we see it with our customers, we see it in the marketplace, and we also think that AI is helping accelerate that as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably the new war out there, isn't it? Is the bad actors using AI, and therefore people like yourself on our behalf are trying to use AI to kind of outmaneuver the bad actors. Therefore, this big AI war is going on in the world of cyber detection.
Absolutely. And I've said this before, I think it's a cat and mouse game. And the key for us is staying one step ahead of those attackers. That's the key here.
Yeah, I don't think there's time to pause and think too hard about how hard or where to deploy AI, because the bad guys are definitely going to be using it, and they're not going to wait for us to catch up.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right. We all understand how important cyber security is, but how do you make it, top of the list, a real priority at the board level?
Yeah, certainly on the boards that I sit on, the conversation is a case of, when, not if. And, I think it's really hard to out-invest the bad actors, and therefore we need to be prepared for these attacks. So therefore, not just how we respond in the moment, but how we recover afterwards. So the language we're using is much more around resilience rather than detection. And, when we talk about resilience, we really do elevate it from being an IT problem to being a board level problem.
Yes.
And, I think the accountability for this needs to move way above an IT manager, an IT director, even a CISO if a business has one. And certainly on the boards that I sit on, we do take accountability for it as a board, and I take accountability for it personally as the chair. And I make sure it's number one item on all of our risk registers. And I'll be very surprised around any PE-backed board for sure if cyber wasn't the number one risk that people were talking about, and how we were protecting ourselves and being ready to recover in the event that it does happen.
And you're fortunate, I guess, in that you worked in cybersecurity businesses, you've got an understanding of the technology. What advice would you give to people who are chairs of businesses that don't necessarily have that technology background?
Sure. Well, I think, you're right. I probably have the knowledge of what someone else's bad day looks like. And, I hope that bad day never comes my way. But I think it's about knowledge and understanding. I think, people should use their personal networks to just discover where other people have a bad day and how bad it was and how they recovered from it. And clearly go and get some advice, from people like yourselves in terms of what those bad days look like and what other people do, and start to benchmark yourself. A quick health check or current state assessment is a really quick way to work out, how ready you are.
Yes.
Not just to respond in the moment, but to recover afterwards. I really feel this point around resilience is the point that people need to be thinking about.
Absolutely. So we understand some of the cyber risks and the challenges in the market, but how do you change the discussion at a board level from being a technical IT one to an operational risk one?
Yeah, I think perhaps the easy place to start is by me feeling accountable. I can't talk in IT language. I definitely don't know the technical details of what the detection or prevention team are doing, but I can talk about business risk. And, I can get a sense for what that bad day might feel like and how we might be having to respond. And therefore I can elevate the discussion and make it feel perhaps more strategic, more business risk-like, and kind of really help us think about how we would practically respond in that moment.
Yeah.
And I'm a keen advocate for doing simulated attacks at board level. We try to run these every 6 months on the boards that I sit on. So we will do a live attack. Someone will play the role effectively of the NDR or of the CISO or IT director, and we'll call into the board meeting and say we're under attack. these are the systems that have gone down, and lead us through what our decision making would be. I'm really interested in that moment, how people show up. This is going to be one of our most stressful moments. So I'm keen we rehearse it and that we don't do it for the first time, if ever it happens for real. And I'm really keen on the roles that people play in that moment. Perhaps that's through fear, because I fear that with a title of chair or even a title of a chief exec, in your case, people would look to the title for being the most expert person in the room and the person leading the response. Well, that might not be true. Luckily, whilst I do know a little bit about how to prevent and detect an attack, I probably wouldn't be the most expert person in the room. So who else do we need to invite in the room? And let's do a simulation with them. Let's rehearse together. Let's live that moment. Let's make sure we've been down these decision trees once before at least.
I have to say the board simulation exercise you talk about is something we've seen more and more organizations take up. The other thing we're seeing is a lot of threat modeling pieces of work we're doing as well. And again, it's just to understand where the risk is in your business. And then you can openly decide what you want to do and how much risk you're prepared to take as an organization.
Yeah, definitely. Like we said earlier, it's a case of when, not if. And therefore, it's about balancing that risk and understanding the threat that is specific to the business and where the risk might sit. Across the businesses I work with, the risks will be slightly different.
Yes.
And they'll be different whether you're a B2C business or a B2B business. So let's make it really specific. And then ongoing, ask your MDR provider to do the threat intelligence for you to bring the real threats, to surface those real threats. So I can then put a business risk layer over the top of those, and we then simulate the attacks on that basis.
Yeah. I mean, as I said, we're seeing more and more of this every single day. And I think people just need to be cognizant of what's out there and be as resilient as possible.
Yeah. And it kind of leads me on to think a little bit about, do we always have the expertise in the boardroom or even in the business, in these moments? And I'm a big fan of using businesses like Cyberfort to help us be fractional CISOs. It's almost an unaffordable job for many mid-market businesses. And therefore, we want the expertise on a fractional basis, so you can help us in these moments. You can help us design our strategy. You can help us with our current state assessment. You can help us with our simulations, and then you can be in the room, when it does happen.
Well, that's something we see a lot of, actually, organizations using us for that. But also what we see is that I wouldn't say people are masquerading themselves as experts in this space, but there are people in the IT services space who will say they are a cybersecurity expert. How would you differentiate when you look at organizations between those that are a services provider, an MSP, and those specialists in the cyberspace? How would you differentiate the difference between the two?
Sure. Well, I guess certainly in the PE-backed world, we're fortunate that we can use a network of other PE-backed businesses to help us understand who they have spoken to, who they might use. So I think we can get to a short list pretty quickly.
Okay.
I would definitely encourage any firm trying to choose, an MDR provider to run an RFP to think really hard about what the quality of the outcomes that they're looking for, what the service level outcomes they're trying to look for. I would definitely use a network of CISOs that would have used other MDRs as well. I think those of you that are of a high quality, are of a small group, and therefore actually the names are reasonably familiar.
Absolutely. So Mark, I was reading recently that only 1 in 10 organizations have done a full supply chain audit of their organization, which is astonishing based on some of the recent cyber attacks that have been driven by supply chain challenges. So how should an organization be resilient against, not just themselves, what they're doing, but also their supply chain?
Yeah. Well, again, really worrying statistic. It's definitely true that we probably don't understand our supply chains very well. I think that needs to be addressed in that current state assessment or that health check where, the MDR supplier goes and does that assessment for us. And in addition to supply chain risk, I would probably put in there third-party software risk as well. Yeah. And possibly also the M&A risk of the businesses that we're acquiring. In the PE-backed world, we're building and buying on a lot of businesses that are probably not as sophisticated as the business that they're being integrated into.
Yes.
And, we should probably be doing a lot more due diligence upfront to assess, that the risk of those businesses. Because I think the point you're making really is that the bad actors find it much easier to come in through the back door rather than the front door. And there's no doubt here, there's a lot more work to do in terms of due diligence.
And in terms of suppliers and supply chain, I mean, the consequences of not having the right level of resilience for your supply chain. I mean, we see that with some recent significant retail attacks, with M&S and Co-op, just two examples.
Yeah, and JLR to add to that list as well. And there's no doubt there's a lot more work to be done here in terms of that supply chain. And we're certainly starting to see it in a lot of the big RFPs that we're responding to. Our big clients are asking us to kind of look beyond our own kind of threat environment and look into the supply chain threat environment as well. This is a problem that's just going to get bigger and bigger, and the challenge is bigger and bigger, and hence why it needs to be a boardroom thought and response rather than an IT problem.
Exactly. So a lot of people have got Cyber Essentials and Cyber Essentials Plus, cyber insurance, and many boards think that's enough. They think the covered risk is taken care of. What's your sense on that?
Yeah, I think, well, look, the certifications are obviously good. It definitely raises awareness. It kind of gives you some sense of where you are as an organization, but it's not going to stop the attacker.
No.
It's not going to prevent the attacker coming in. And it's definitely not going to be a reason that you would give in a boardroom if you're attacked and you weren't ready for that attack. We need to think beyond that. And back to this point about elevating it to a boardroom risk, and the chair in particular owning that business risk. I don't think any chair would accept a certification as being good enough. But I do think it's important to look at where the certification, the MDR cover, and the insurance cover, and kind of where they all work together.
Yes.
That's one continuous kind of threat protection that we need to understand at board level. And again, I suspect many boards don't understand that.
And also there's some commercial value in having a good expert cyber provider to you, because cyber insurance premiums will come down if you're shown to be doing the right things. By the same token, if you don't do the right things, as has happened with some companies recently, their cyber insurance hasn't necessarily paid out because they hadn't done the right things.
Yeah. I mean, again, a worrying thing to understand, and therefore we need to understand the whole landscape. And, I certainly explain to the boards that I'm sat on, what's at risk here ultimately is the ultimate value of the business.
Yes.
It's not necessarily, the short-term impact, but someone someday is going to come along and want to buy the businesses that I'm chair of. And if they've seen us have an attack, and they've seen us not being prepared, and if they've seen a poor response, that's clearly going to go to value.
Absolutely.
So, putting all that into context, there's the whole valuation of the business really that we're talking about here. And therefore, the cost of having an assessment, the cost of having an MDR supplier do 24/7 security operations for you is relatively immaterial to the overall value of the business.
Yes. Well, we've got a number of board members who'll be listening to this and seeing what we've got to say. But the question I've got for you, I guess, how can you practically do something here? What are kind of the 3 recommendations you'd put out there of things you could practically do to help an organization be as secure as possible?
Sure. I think first one definitely is get an expert in the room.
Yeah.
I've shared with you, I think we all need a fractional CISO, and we probably don't have those types of people in our organizations, the size of businesses certainly that I chair. I definitely then do that current state assessment or health check. You need to know where you are as a benchmark and give yourself a kind of clear action plan and strategy to move forward, and kind of start to get the investment case built for, how you're going to invest to protect yourself from a cyber attack. And maybe the last one is a very practical one, but something that's come out of all of our attacks is making sure that you can communicate in the event of the attack and you can no longer access your systems. Example might be that you're locked out of your CRM system and you can't contact your main customers, which certainly came out of one of the simulated attacks we did. So what we made sure is that the key people who will be in the room when we have an attack have all got hard copies at home, locked away in a safe that has everybody's mobile number in, because we don't remember no mobiles like we used to do. It's got our lawyers' numbers in there as well. It's got our insurance details in there. So we've all got hard copies at home that, when it happens, not if it happens, we can all get hold of each other.
So Mark, I think they're 3 fantastic examples of practical things people can do. And I'd like to personally thank you very much for everything you've put into today. It's very insightful from my perspective. It's great to hear a customer of ours speaking and waxing so lyrically about what we do as a supplier, but also have a great understanding about what's required as a chairman and leading a board, and what you need to do to make yourself as resilient and secure as possible. So thank you, Mark.
Great.
I really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So thanks for joining today's episode 2 of the Cyberfort Executive Briefing. Watch out for episode 3 coming soon. And for episode 2, please like, share and brief and tell your friends, and hopefully make the world a more secure place.